Teachers of Reddit, what is the worst thing you've seen a parent do to their child that either made you want to, or did make you, call Child Protective Services? Couple years back I was running a preschool classroom in a low-income area. Had a kid who would constantly come in visibly dirty, usually always had a dirty diaper, was almost 5. So we had a theory that she never really got a bath, or changed or anything. Changed her up before sending her home one day, and I had my assistant draw a star on her diaper. Sure enough, go to change her when she arrives the next morning, and there's a star on her diaper. She had been in the same soaked diaper for nearly 18 hours. Not a teacher, but I was playing with some kids one time, and one of them fell down because of the roots around this giant tree. She started crying immediately, but not because of the injury, but because her white shoes got scuffed. Her little brother hugged her really tight and kept saying he'd try to find a way to hide them when they got home so that mom didn't see them. The girl said she was going to get beaten up again. Told my mom. Mom called the police. Never saw the kids again. I've written about this before, so I'm just going to copy/paste my answer because I'm not in the right mindset today to actually relive it through words. About 5 years ago in my 10th grade English class, one of the best students I've ever had the honor of teaching came to class horribly beaten up. He was over an hour early and just slowly walked to his seat and sat there quietly. I sat next to him begging him to tell me what happened. He did. But I wished he hadn't. His dad found out that my student was gay and decided that no son 0Fs would be, or could be, gay. So he decided to beat the gayness out of him. He beat him to a pulp. 2 black eyes, a broken nose, broken ribs, and numerous cuts and bruises. When he was done beating him, he ripped my student's clothes off and put a meat cleaver on the table and made him watch gay porn naked in order to make sure that he wouldn't get a hard-on. He told him if he got hard, he would chop his penis off. I didn't let him finish. I didn't want to know what else he had endured. I called the cops. An ambulance was sent for my student. They found the dad at work. He was an elementary school teacher, teaching his class like it was just another normal Monday. It took everything I had to keep from going there and running that motherfucker over with my car. Thankfully his mom wasn't as controlled as I was. She tried ripping her husband's head off at the police station. It literally took 4 cops to get her off of him. She's about 5 feet 2, 90 to 100 pounds. He's about 6 feet 2, 250 lbs. And she fucked him up. And after she walked out of that station, she went home and burned every single one of his things in the fireplace. Glad to say my student made a full recovery. He, along with his mom and siblings, spend all the holidays with us. I will lead with I'm not a teacher. However, I have had to report to CPS. A sweet 14-year-old joined a server I'm in on Discord. I also happen to be a moderator and immediately we couldn't help but find her to be a refreshing change in company. She's passionate about animals, bright, basically teaching herself as her mom is doing her best, but still struggling, and she's at home. But the more she talked about her mom, the more alarmed our mod team got. She was jaundiced, losing weight no matter what she ate, had constant stomach pain, and despite all those alarming symptoms, her mom refused to even take her to a GP. Her mother would scream at her if she asked for help with school things. She was severely stunted in education, and she was regularly told she was useless and couldn't do anything. The last straw was when she finally admitted there was physical abuse as we suspected, including a chair being thrown at her head. Despite most of us being under 25 and struggling ourselves, we refused to leave a kid unsupervised in that position. After a long serious conversation about what the symptoms in her health could mean, the escalation in physical abuse and the obvious assistance her mom needed, I got the necessary information for the CPS report and filed it immediately. In 2 days, the agents arrived, assessed the situation, and were able to get some sense into the mother. The 14-year-old is now getting help with school, going to a specialist children's hospital, and the mom is working to get her own issues under control with aid, while CPS makes sure everything is going right. Sometimes the solution isn't remove the kid, sometimes it's assist the parent. Abuse is always abuse, but it isn't always intentional. When it isn't intentional, it often alarms the parent to realize what they've done. As a child from that situation, with loving but also abusive parents who didn't know better, I have been determined to help others in that situation. Had a student beaten so badly he couldn't sit in his chair. Entire back was covered in lashes. Admin gets the mom to come to the school and the cops are there waiting for her. They arrest her on the spot while taking another child, an infant, out of her arms to do so. When they asked her why she did it, her response was, because he needed it. She was so warped she couldn't even come up with an excuse. So sad. Substitute here. I had to call CPS when a middle schooler broke down when I told him I was sending him to the assistant principal's office for making inappropriate comments to classmates. He begged me not to because he couldn't get in trouble with dad again. I asked why. Because my spidey senses went off, and he showed me the bruises and blood on his thighs, and told me they went higher. In a case CPS was already involved in, I had an 8th grader with frequent pants wetting incidents, which is a massive red flag for sexual abuse. I had a 7-year-old confess suicidal thoughts to me. I still think about him and hope he got help. He cried and thanked me when I told him I had feelings like that at his age too. I had a 5-year-old wrap me up in a bear hug and beg me to adopt him so he could have a mommy who loved him. He'd known me for 2 hours and I told him I liked his drawing. Last week was my last week of teaching. I will miss the kids terribly, but not the mental burden of so many babies going through hell in a system that is set up to fail most of them from the start. Had one particular year where we had a bunch of students who had terrible home lives. Roaches coming out of book bags, dirty clothes, etc. One parent-teacher conference, the parent was clearly on pills and kept talking about what a terrible child she had, but the kid wasn't bad at all. They just had low grades because they missed so much school. That summer their house burned down and their brother was arrested for making child porn. Another set of parents came in that year with a toddler wearing only a diaper, and they were all really dirty, like they hadn't bathed in a week. The child always looked clean at school though, which made me think they cleaned up in the bathroom before school. I don't know if this counts, but I called the CPS for my sisters and I. My sisters and I were regularly beaten for failing any tests. We were sat at a desk, and when we didn't answer a question right we were punched, hair pulled, face slammed into the desk and pinched. Our parents beat us really often and sometimes for no reason. Once I was sweeping when she told me to, and I was scared, cause she was going one by one to each of my sisters to beat them, and I heard the screaming get closer. I got frantic and stopped cause the beating was inevitable. She just started kicking when she pushed me to the floor. The breaking point was when she tried to drown my sister in the bathtub. I told my counselor, who wrote down the report completely of everything. I desperately asked to go into foster care. Months later, about 6 to 7 months, a woman came to talk to me. They told me to go to the front and the receptionist whispered, "Your caseworker is in the room to the right." CPS interviewed me and her face was in shock. She apologized for taking so long and said we go to those who can't speak for themselves first. Then she made one home visit. My sisters were too scared to say anything, and I told her, please, don't give up, they're too scared to say anything, because my parents are listening in the other room. She nodded and left. Again months later I came home from a friend's and my mom said CPS gave her an entire copy of the report I gave to them. I've never seen her more angry. I thought she was bluffing, and said no I didn't. Then she said the date, time, and what I said in the report. I told my counselor, and she said well I called CPS, and they said they didn't do that. So yeah, the abuse just went on. To this day my stomach curdle at the thought of why and how CPS could just do nothing. Just one home visit and gone. Father is a teacher. A teacher in the school had 2 boys, both in high school. She had some mental issues and had to take a few weeks off. The older child came in smelling horrible a few days in a row, and a teacher pulled him aside and asked if everything was alright. He said, and I shit you not, "Mom hasn't been around to give me a bath." Like it wasn't a big deal at all. Kid is 16 and his mother gives him bath like you would a 3-year-old. When they brought his brother, 15, in to talk to him about his home life, he confirmed this. Not 4 hours later CPS entered the home and removed them. Teacher is still employed. Did my first CPS report on a student this year. She's a very emotional child and I noticed something was up immediately when she started acting out in class. She opened up to me at recess one day, saying that her parents fight all the time. They scream and yell and hit each other and it makes her sad. She said that one night, dad was about to hit mom and she didn't want him to, so she got in the way to stop him and he ended up hitting her in the mouth instead. What's crazy is that her stories were so similar to what I went through as a kid. My parents would always have these ugly fights where they would scream and throw things at each other and my mom would end up physically attacking my dad, among other things like pull a knife out in front of us and threaten suicide. It's crazy to look back and think that if I would have confided in my teacher or counselor about all of that, they would have reported my parents to CPS. I never thought that till my student confided in me about her own family issues. I work in student support in a high school. We frequently put in child protection reports. The worst one was a 14-year-old girl living with her baby sister, mentally ill mum, and violent dad. Dad and mum get high on meth. Dad beats mum. Dad rapes girl. Dad gets girl pregnant and punches her in the stomach until the baby dies. Girl denies anything is happening at home because she thinks if she is removed, she can't protect her baby sister anymore. Dad ended up in jail. Not as serious as other stories, but my aunt works with a lot of immigrant children, usually grade 1, 2, 3, and she said she had noticed a student being very tired every day and not doing any homework, so the next time she met with the parents she asked them if he is getting enough sleep or what he does at home. The parents tell my aunt that they make him help in the kitchen of their restaurant every evening after school and they usually get home at around 1 AM. My aunt was very angry and tried explaining that he can't be working at such a young age and until so late because he had schoolwork to do and it was affecting his grades. Aunt also reported it to the principal, but I have no idea if it got to the point of calling CPS about it. Had a friend in high school whose mom refused to buy her toiletries/clothes/food. She had to work and pay for it all herself and also wouldn't pay for her school lunches. The friend had 2 little brothers who were spoiled heavily, and the mom wore 2 giant buttons of the boys on her clothes everywhere, but treated the friend like the plague. I visited her house once, which was fairly new, and the counters were covered in old dishes and there was pet fesses everywhere. They had 3 large dogs and multiple cats, all indoor pets. Thankfully our school got involved, and she got emancipated from them at 17. She kept in contact with her dad, who was mostly under the mom's thumb, but never did anything bad toward her. I'm friends with some teachers. One family literally lived in a cave. They did periodic welfare checks, but the kids were fed, cleaned and clothed well enough, and they were sheltered, so that was that as I understand. The parents have never been found to be on drugs or anything. They were just so poor that they lived in a fucking cave. This is in rural Appalachia in the US. Which even my husband, who does home health, always has at least one patient with dirt floors and half caved in roofs. Not me, but my mom. This kid was acting up at school, mostly Kindergarten stuff, and when his parents found out, they would lock him in a closet and literally slide trays of food under a slot in the door. It was like the kid was in prison. You might think, whoa, severe timeout, but this kid missed school for 3 days because he was in the closet. It gets worse. He told his teachers why he was gone, so they called DCFS to handle the situation. The parents find out and buy a tarantula. You know where this is going. They let the tarantula bite the kid and send him off to school with a big ass spider bite on his hand. I saw him a couple weeks later and the nurse had wrapped it in gauze because of how bad it had gotten. One of my preschooler's parents sent him in the same socks over and over, and he had so much earwax and hung that it smelt. I told my boss and went out to buy him some socks. Since we were playing with water, I just acted like he accidentally got his socks wet and put another pair on him and sent them both home. You bet your bottom dollar he was wearing the same socks I just gave him the next day. I was the one who discovered the abuse. I had a student who was strangely very violent, irritable and loud. He was very difficult and the other kids were afraid of him because he was a bully and would beat them up. One day, I moved to take him to timeout after an incident like this occurred again. It was a daily thing. Well, as soon as I stood up and started walking to him, Suddenly, he throws up his arms in that crossed position. If you've ever been hit as a kid, you know the pose. I was obviously confused and worried. I sat him down and asked him what he was talking about, and he is just bawling, screaming, "Mommy, don't hit me. Please don't hurt me," over and over. I lifted up his sleeves and there were bruises all over his arms. Technically, I'm still a student teacher only, so I wasn't allowed in the room during the investigation. I did hear from a colleague that he was in fact removed from the home, and the mother had been beating him. By law, if a teacher thinks they need to call CPS, they call CPS. Every time anything happens, they are supposed to make that call. It's a part of being what's called a mandatory reporter, a person in direct child care who has an immediate responsibility for the child. And you can call too. Impartial information from the community helps cases move forward towards a good solution, and it's always anonymous. Toll free, even. Save the number for your state in your phone. It might save a kid's life. Here's a case where CPS was called for a ridiculous reason. A friend of ours was having trouble with her 13-year-old daughter. She threw a hissy fit about what clothes she was going to wear to school from a closet full and missed the school bus. As a punishment, the mom told her she wasn't going to drive her, she'd have to walk. Because the girl was 10 minutes tardy, she got called into the principal's office and went through the whole story. It turns out the family lives just over 1 mile from the school, and it was just below 40 degrees that day. Bingo. This violates some district policy against children walking to school in a cold environment. CPS gets called, and the mom gets a home visit. What a crock of shite. Not a teacher, but had CPS called on my ex-husband and me. I'd shown his daughters a bunch of Weird Al videos over the weekend, and there's a line in headline news parody of by Crash Test Dummies that talks about Lorena Bobbitt. Once, there was this guy who made his wife so mad one night that she cut off his wiener. I didn't think it connected at all. It wasn't acted out, for God's sake. So the oldest, 5, goes to school and tells her teacher her dad showed her a movie where a guy's wiener got cut off. It was fine, but I swear I never imagined Weird Al being the cause of a CPS visit.